Imagine two children sitting in the same classroom. Both are equally curious. Both ask endless questions. Both want to understand the world. But after finishing a math worksheet, something very different happens. One child hears, "Wow, you're so smart." The other hears, "You worked really hard on that." The words seem almost identical. Both sound encouraging. Both come from love. Yet psychologists now believe these two sentences can quietly send children down entirely different paths that may last for decades. Most parents never notice it happening. Teachers rarely intend it. The children certainly don't realize it. But every compliment teaches more than the lesson itself. It teaches children who they are. This begins with one of the most powerful psychological forces we possess: identity. Humans are constantly asking one silent question throughout life. Who am I? Children simply ask it much earlier than adults realize. Every grade, every compliment, every criticism, every comparison with classmates, every proud smile from a parent, every disappointed look after a mistake. Each experience becomes another small clue. Eventually, those clues become a story. I'm creative. I'm funny. I'm athletic. I'm shy. And for some children, I'm the smart one. At first, that sounds like a wonderful identity to have. After all, intelligence is admired almost everywhere. Schools rewarded, families celebrated, friends respected, teachers proudly point toward it. Many adults genuinely believe telling children they're intelligent builds confidence. It certainly feels that way. The child smiles. The parents smile. Everyone feels encouraged. But psychology often reveals something surprising. The most powerful consequences of praise are rarely immediate. They appear years later. Research led by psychologist Carol Dweck transformed how scientists think about praise. In one famous series of experiments, children completed relatively easy puzzles. Afterward, researchers praised different groups differently. Some children heard, "You're very smart." Others heard, "You worked really hard." The difference sounded tiny. But what happened next shocked researchers. When given the choice between another easy puzzle or a much harder one where they might actually learn something, the children praised for intelligence often chose the easier challenge. The children praised for effort frequently chose the harder one. Why? Because the meaning of failure had quietly changed. If intelligence becomes part of identity, failure stops being information. Failure becomes evidence. A difficult problem no longer says, "I haven't learned this yet." Instead, it whispers, "Maybe I'm not actually smart." That whisper is incredibly powerful because humans naturally protect their identities. Think about how adults behave. If someone believes they are honest, being caught in a lie feels deeply uncomfortable. If someone believes they are kind, acting selfishly creates guilt. Our identities constantly influence our choices. Children are no different. When intelligence becomes identity, mistakes suddenly become dangerous. Imagine a child sitting in front of a difficult math problem. One possible thought is, "This is hard." Another is, "This is hard. Therefore, maybe I'm not smart." Those are completely different emotional experiences. The first invites curiosity. The second creates fear. Slowly, something subtle begins happening. The child who once loved learning starts loving certainty instead. Easy assignments feel safe. Correct answers feel safe. Being first feels safe. Not because learning has become less enjoyable, but because uncertainty now threatens identity itself. Ironically, the very children praised for intelligence often become the ones most afraid of looking unintelligent. That fear usually remains invisible. Teachers see excellent grades. Parents see impressive report cards. Friends see success. Inside, however, something much quieter is growing. Not confidence, pressure. Pressure to always understand immediately. Pressure to never struggle publicly. Pressure to keep proving an identity that was never meant to become a performance. And the older the child becomes, the heavier that invisible performance often feels. Because eventually, every classroom becomes too difficult for effortless success. That moment changes everything. For many children, school feels like a game they somehow learned before everyone else. The answers come quickly. Homework rarely feels overwhelming. Teachers smile when they raise their hand. Exams become predictable. Success arrives so consistently that struggle almost disappears. From the outside, This looks like the ideal childhood. Parents proudly tell relatives, school is easy. Teachers recommend advanced classes. Everyone assumes the future will unfold in exactly the same way. But life has a strange habit. Eventually, everyone reaches a problem they cannot solve immediately. For some people, that moment arrives in high school. For others, university. Perhaps it's the first demanding job, starting a business, marriage, parenthood, or simply discovering that intelligence cannot prevent heartbreak. Whatever form it takes, nearly everyone eventually enters a room where being naturally talented is no longer enough. This is where many former smart kids experience something deeply confusing. For the first time in their lives, effort feels necessary. And strangely, effort itself feels like failure. Think about that for a moment. If success always arrived quickly during childhood, then needing hours of practice suddenly feels alarming. Someone else studies 8 hours for an exam. You study 8 hours. Instead of feeling proud, you wonder, why am I having to work this hard? The effort becomes evidence against the identity. Not because effort actually means lower intelligence, but because the child unconsciously learned that truly smart people shouldn't need it. Psychologists sometimes describe this as an identity threat. The challenge isn't the difficult task. The challenge is what the difficult task appears to say about who you are. That fear quietly changes behavior. Some students stop taking the hardest classes, not because they lack ability, because they want to protect the image of always succeeding. Some avoid applying for ambitious jobs. Some postpone starting businesses for years. Others become perfectionists, endlessly preparing instead of acting. The goal slowly shifts. It is no longer to grow. It is to avoid looking incapable. One fascinating psychological phenomenon helps explain this. It is called self-handicapping. Imagine two people preparing for an important presentation. One practices carefully. The other procrastinates until the last minute. If the second person performs badly, there is an excuse. I didn't really try, oddly enough. That excuse protects identity. Failure after genuine effort feels terrifying. Failure without full effort feels survivable. Many people never realize they are doing this. They simply describe themselves as unmotivated, or distracted, or inconsistent. But beneath those habits often lies something much quieter. Fear. Not fear of failure itself. Fear of what failure might reveal. Because if intelligence has become your identity, every challenge becomes an examination of who you are. This creates another hidden problem. Many former gifted children become addicted to environments where they already know they will succeed. They stay inside familiar routines. They choose hobbies where they already excel. They become experts at remaining competent. Meanwhile, growth quietly happens somewhere else. Consider professional musicians, Olympic athletes, elite chess players, world-class scientists. None of them spend most of their time practicing things they already know. They spend enormous amounts of time looking incompetent, missing notes, losing matches, testing wrong ideas, being corrected, repeating tiny improvements thousands of times. From the outside, it almost looks inefficient. From the perspective of psychology, it is exactly how expertise develops. Real mastery requires repeatedly entering situations where you are temporarily the least capable person in the room. Children who struggled early often become surprisingly comfortable with this. They already know what confusion feels like. They know improvement takes time. Practice never threatened their identity. It created it. That difference becomes enormous in adulthood, because modern life changes too quickly for anyone to remain permanently talented. Technology changes. Industries disappear. Careers evolve. Entire fields transform within a decade. The people who continue succeeding are rarely those who started with the highest IQ. They are often those who became the most adaptable. The people willing to say, I don't know. Teach me. I was wrong. I need more practice. Ironically, those sentences become easier to say once intelligence is no longer something that must constantly be protected. And perhaps that is the greatest hidden cost of being the smart kid. Not unrealistic expectations, not pressure, not perfectionism. Those are only symptoms. The deeper cost is believing your value comes from already knowing, instead of becoming someone who never stops learning. Perhaps this leads to a question that feels both uncomfortable and strangely hopeful. If intelligence isn't what determines lifelong growth, then what does? Modern psychology increasingly points toward a different answer. Not talent, not Ike, not even early success. Curiosity. The willingness to keep changing. Think about the people who continue surprising themselves well into old age. Someone learns a new language at 65. Someone else begins painting after retirement. A former engineer becomes a musician. A quiet parent starts a business. A scientist abandons a theory after discovering better evidence. These people are rarely protecting an identity. They are expanding one. Notice something remarkable. The adults we admire most seldom introduce themselves by saying, "I'm intelligent." Instead, they describe habits. "I love learning. I ask lots of questions. I'm still figuring things out." Those sentences reveal a completely different relationship with identity. One identity is fixed. The other is alive. Perhaps that is why curiosity is so powerful. Curiosity welcomes uncertainty. Curiosity survives mistakes. Curiosity actually becomes stronger when it discovers something it didn't know yesterday. Intelligence often seeks certainty. Curiosity seeks discovery. Only one of those can continue forever. This helps explain another fascinating psychological observation. Many people spend years trying to become the perfect version of themselves. The perfect employee, the perfect parent, the perfect entrepreneur, the perfect artist, the perfect partner. But perfection has a strange characteristic. The closer you get, the farther away it seems. There is always someone more successful, someone wiser, someone healthier, someone richer, someone more disciplined. The finish line quietly keeps moving. Psychologists sometimes describe this as the arrival fallacy, the belief that happiness finally begins after reaching some future destination. Yet when people arrive, the destination quickly becomes ordinary. A new goal immediately appears. Another promotion, another achievement, another version of yourself that still feels incomplete. Maybe that is why so many highly successful people continue feeling behind. Not because they lack success, because they built an identity around reaching a future version of themselves that can never fully exist. The imagined self is always one step ahead, always slightly wiser, always slightly happier, always slightly more accomplished. It is a horizon, and horizons move as we move. Perhaps the imagined future self was never supposed to become reality. Perhaps it serves a different purpose. Imagine hiking through a forest. A compass never tells you exactly where you will stand 10 hours from now. It simply keeps pointing in a helpful direction. You don't worship the compass. You don't try to become the compass. You simply let it guide the next step. Maybe our imagined future self works the same way. Its purpose isn't to become perfectly real. Its purpose is to encourage movement. Because movement has always mattered more than certainty. Every conversation changes something. Every difficult book changes something. Every uncomfortable apology changes something. Every failure changes something. Every act of courage changes something. Most of those moments feel insignificant while they're happening. But identity is never rewritten all at once. It is rewritten sentence by sentence, habit by habit, relationship by relationship, year by year. This is why looking backward often feels so surprising. 7 years ago, you almost certainly believed you understood yourself. Today, you can probably see countless ways that version of you was incomplete. 7 years from now, another version of you will almost certainly look back at today's version with the very same compassion. Not embarrassment, not disappointment, compassion. Because today's beliefs are not your final beliefs. Today's fears are not your final fears. Today's ambitions are not your final ambitions. Today's identity is not your final identity. You are still under construction. And perhaps that realization is one of the most freeing discoveries psychology has to offer. You do not need to accurately predict who you will become. No one can, not even your own brain. The future version of you will be shaped by conversations that haven't happened, books you haven't opened, people you haven't met, mistakes you haven't made, opportunities that don't yet exist, acts of kindness you cannot yet imagine. How could today's imagination possibly include experiences that today's life has not yet provided? It can't. And that is exactly why the future remains full of possibility. Perhaps the greatest mistake isn't failing to become the person you imagined. Perhaps the greatest mistake is believing that your imagination was ever large enough to contain the person you are capable of becoming. Maybe the smartest child was never the one who knew the most answers. Maybe the smartest child was the one who never lost the courage to keep asking questions. Because intelligence can open doors, but curiosity keeps walking through them. And long after grades are forgotten, long after awards collect dust, long after every label disappears, the people who continue growing are rarely those who proved they were gifted. They are the people who remained humble enough to become beginners again and again. So perhaps the real question was never, was I the smart kid? Perhaps the better question has always been, am I still willing to learn like one?